German Shepherd rescued from darkness after a month. His first glimpse of light was heartbreaking. For an entire month, the world outside moved on. People went about their daily lives, the sun rose and set, and seasons shifted. But for one German Shepherd, time had stopped. He lay curled up in a dark, damp place, a space so suffocating that he had forgotten what fresh air smelled like. His world was nothing but shadows, silence, and the never-ending hunger gnawing at his ribs. His body had become frail, his fur matted with dirt and dried blood. The once proud dog, known for his strength and intelligence, had been reduced to a mere ghost of himself. His breathing was shallow, his heartbeat weak, and his mind clouded with confusion. The loneliness was unbearable. He had stopped expecting someone to come, stopped expecting kindness. But somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope still remained. At first he had barked, loud, desperate barks that echoed against the cold walls, begging for someone, anyone, to hear him. But as the days passed, his voice grew weaker. His cries turned to soft whimpers, then silence. Now he barely had the energy to lift his head. But on this night, something inside him refused to give up. With the last bit of strength he had left, he let out a low, mournful howl, a sound filled with desperation and pain. It wasn't the powerful bark of a guard dog. It wasn't a call of warning or aggression. It was the sound of a soul breaking. Outside, beyond the walls that trapped him, life carried on as usual. Cars drove by, people walked past, unaware that just a few feet away, a life was fading. His howl faded into the night, unheard, or so it seemed. Before the darkness swallowed him, he had a home, family. He remembered the warm hands that used to pet him, the laughter of children, and the feeling of the sun warming his fur as he ran through a yard. But all of that was gone now. Maybe he had grown too big, too energetic for his owners to handle. Maybe they had moved away and decided he wasn't worth taking along. Or maybe, worst of all, they had abandoned him on purpose, thinking he would figure it out on his own. But he hadn't. Instead, he had been trapped. Maybe he wandered into an old basement, looking for shelter, and the door slammed shut behind him. Maybe he had been locked away by someone cruel, left to suffer alone. The details didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that no one had come back for him. At first, he had waited, convinced that they would return. Every sound outside made his ears perk up. Every passing shadow made his heart race. But days turned into weeks, and hope turned into despair. Now he didn't even have the strength to stand. His stomach had long since stopped growling. It had given up on expecting food. His eyes, once sharp and alert, had grown dull. He could barely tell the difference between sleep and waking. He was slipping away. And yet, something inside him still clung to life. Because somewhere deep down, he still believed that the world was not done with him yet. The world outside was bright, full of life, completely unaware of the suffering hidden behind forgotten walls. People walked past, cars drove by, and the air was filled with the usual sounds of the city. Honking horns, distant conversations, the occasional bark of a well-loved dog. But beneath all of that noise, buried under the weight of neglect and silence, there was a sound so faint, so weak, that it was almost impossible to notice. For nearly a month, the German Shepherd had remained trapped in his prison of darkness. The space was small, cold, and suffocating, with walls that seemed to close in tighter with every passing day. The floor was littered with scraps of dirt and filth, and the air smelled of decay, a mixture of old metal, damp stone, and something far worse, the stench of hopelessness. His breathing was ragged, his body limp. He had stopped expecting rescue. But fate had other plans. It was by pure chance that someone finally noticed him. A man, a passerby, an animal rescuer, or maybe even a construction worker checking the old building, walked by the abandoned structure. It had been left to rot, its windows shattered, its walls covered in peeling paint. No one had stepped inside for years. It was just another forgotten place in the city, blending into the background like so many others. As the man moved past the building, he suddenly paused. He wasn't sure why at first. Maybe it was instinct, that strange feeling you get when something is wrong, even if you can't see it. Maybe it was the way the wind carried a sound, so soft, so broken, that it was almost impossible to recognize. A whimper. It was barely more than a whisper, a breath of sound that disappeared just as quickly as it had come. If the man had been listening to music, if he had been distracted even for a second, he never would have heard it. But something made him stop. He turned his head, frowning, listening carefully. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. He almost convinced himself that he had imagined it. But then there it was again. A whimper, faint, weak, coming from inside. His chest tightened. This wasn't the sound of a dog barking for attention, nor was it the playful yelp of a pet waiting to be let out. This was different. It was raw, filled with pain and exhaustion. It was the sound of an animal that had given up. His heart pounded. He stepped closer to the building, pressing his ear against the cold surface of the wall. The sound came again, so fragile, so heartbreakingly desperate that he knew, without a doubt, that something was terribly wrong. He had to get inside. The door was locked. The man rattled the handle, but it didn't budge. He stepped back, looking around, searching for another way in. The windows were too high, covered in dust and grime, their glass cracked but still holding firm. The building was old, but it was built like a fortress. Whoever had left it behind had made sure that no one could get in or out. His pulse quickened. He pressed his hand against the door, his ears straining for any more sounds from inside. Silence. Was he too late? Had the poor creature inside already taken its last breath? No. He refused to believe that. He took a step back and kicked at the door, his boots slamming against the rusted metal. It groaned under the pressure but didn't give. He kicked again, harder this time. The impact sent pain jolting up his leg, but he ignored it. Another kick, then another. The door gave a sickening creak, its hinges screaming in protest. With one final shove, it finally burst open, the stale, putrid air from inside rushing out to meet him. The smell made his stomach churn. Rotting wood, mildew, and something much worse. Stepping inside, his eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness. The only light came from the doorway behind him, casting long shadows across the room. It was quiet, too quiet. Then he saw him. In the farthest corner of the room, curled up against the wall, was a German shepherd. His body was still, his breathing almost non-existent. His ribs stuck out beneath his thin coat, his fur tangled with dirt and grime. For a moment, the man thought he was too late. He took a cautious step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, buddy." The dog didn't move. He crouched down, carefully reaching out his hand. As soon as his fingers brushed against the matted fur, the dog flinched. A broken whimper escaped his throat, a sound of pure fear. The man's chest tightened. He had found him. But this was only the beginning. The German shepherd lay motionless, barely responding to the presence of the stranger who had just forced his way into the room. His body was stiff, his breathing shallow, and his dull eyes flickered with something between terror and confusion. The man crouched lower, keeping his movements slow and careful. He knew better than to rush. This dog had been alone in the darkness for too long, starving, suffering, waiting for death. Kindness was not something he expected anymore. The rescuer reached out again, his fingers hovering just inches away from the matted fur. The dog flinched. Even in his frail state, his instincts screamed at him to protect himself. His muscles tensed, though they lacked the strength to fight back. He had been hurt before. He had learned that hands could bring pain. The man's heart clenched at the sight. How long had this poor soul been trapped in fear? How many days had he spent thinking no one would come? Then, with infinite patience, the man whispered, "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." And for the first time in weeks, the dog felt something different. Not cruelty, not neglect, but a touch of kindness. The moment the man's hand made contact with his fur, the German shepherd let out a weak, broken whimper. It wasn't a growl, it wasn't even a bark. It was the sound of a soul so exhausted from suffering that it didn't know how to react to gentleness. His body trembled under the stranger's touch, muscles twitching as if expecting pain to follow. He had learned to associate human contact with cruelty. Maybe he had been beaten. Maybe he had been abandoned in this place by someone he had once trusted. Whatever the story was, it had shattered his ability to believe in kindness. The man pulled his hand back slightly, not wanting to overwhelm him. "It's all right, buddy. You're safe now." The dog's ears flickered at the sound of the voice, soft, soothing, nothing like the harsh shouts or cruel laughter he had heard before. But trust was not something that could be given freely anymore. He had spent too long in the darkness, too long in hunger and despair. His mind was a battlefield. Should he run? Should he bite? Should he give up and let whatever happened next happen? But his body had already made the choice for him. He was too weak to resist. The man could see it in his eyes. This wasn't just an injured animal. This was a soul that had been broken. He had to get him out. Now, the German shepherd was barely hanging on. His body was nothing but skin and bone. His muscles wasted away from weeks without food. His dehydration was severe, his energy completely drained. If he wasn't taken to safety soon, there would be no saving him. The man moved quickly but carefully. He pulled off his jacket, draping it gently over the frail dog to provide warmth. The air inside the abandoned building was damp and unforgiving, and the last thing he needed was for the poor animal's body temperature to drop further. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small bottle of water. He twisted the cap off and poured a little into his hand, offering it slowly. The dog's cracked nose twitched. His parched tongue flicked out hesitantly, barely licking at the water before retreating again. His body wanted it, needed it, but his mind was still trapped in survival mode, unsure if this was a trick. The man's heart ached. "Come on, buddy. Just a little. You need it." It took a few more moments, but finally, the dog's instincts won over his fear. His tongue reached out again, lapping up the water drop by drop. The small amount was not enough to heal him, but it was enough to keep him going, for now. Time was running out. The rescuer carefully slipped his arms under the dog's frail body, lifting him gently. The German shepherd let out a soft, pained whimper but didn't struggle. He had no strength left to fight. Holding the dog close, the man turned toward the exit. The bright light of the outside world spilled through the open doorway, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness behind them. For the first time in what felt like forever, the German shepherd was going to see the sky again. But his body was failing fast. Every second counted, and the real fight for survival had only just begun. The man stepped through the broken doorway, holding the frail German shepherd tightly against his chest. The outside world was blinding in comparison to the suffocating darkness the dog had known for so long. Sunlight streamed down, golden and warm, stretching across the land like a silent promise of hope. But the German shepherd didn't see it as hope. As his weak body lay against the rescuer's arms, his head tilted slightly, and for the first time in over a month, his dull, sunken eyes met the light of day. And what happened next was utterly heartbreaking. The instant the sunlight touched his face, the German shepherd squeezed his eyes shut. His body tensed, his breath quickened, and a pitiful whimper escaped his throat. It was as if the very thing that was supposed to symbolize freedom had become his greatest fear. The man felt the dog trembling against him, his ribs rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. At first, he didn't understand. Shouldn't the fresh air feel like a relief? Shouldn't the warmth of the sun feel like comfort after so long in the cold, damp darkness? Then, realization struck. This dog had been in the dark for so long that the world outside no longer felt real. For weeks, his world had been nothing but endless blackness. No light, no movement, no sense of time passing. His mind had adapted to it, had forced itself to survive in a prison of shadows. And now, suddenly, there was brightness, color, and life. But it wasn't comforting. It was terrifying. His eyes fluttered open again, but they darted around frantically, unable to focus, as if struggling to process what he was seeing. The sun, the sky, the trees, everything was too big, too bright, too overwhelming. His body shrank inward, instinctively trying to retreat. But there was nowhere left to hide. A desperate whine escaped him, and he buried his face against the man's chest, trying to escape the light. His heartbeat pounded against his ribs, his breathing ragged. This wasn't the reaction of a dog who had just been saved. This was the reaction of a soul who had forgotten what the world was supposed to look like. The man's throat tightened. He had rescued many animals before, but this was something different. This dog hadn't just been trapped in a place. He had been trapped in fear itself. And now he had to learn to live again. The man sat down carefully, still cradling the German shepherd in his arms. He didn't force him to move. He didn't try to make him face the world all at once. Instead, he gave him time. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured softly, running a gentle hand over the dog's bony frame. "You're safe now." The dog's body remained stiff, but his ear twitched slightly at the words. There was something in that voice, something different from the cruel voices of his past, something softer. For minutes they just sat there. The dog trembled, his breath unsteady, his heart racing. But the man didn't rush him. He just kept stroking his fur, letting him feel warmth that wasn't from the sun, but from kindness. Slowly the trembling lessened. His breaths, though still shaky, became less frantic. And then he lifted his head. It was small, barely anything. But for the first time he wasn't hiding. His dull eyes, clouded with exhaustion and fear, flickered upward. He didn't know what he was looking for. Safety? Reassurance? A reason to believe that this moment wasn't just another nightmare? The man held his gaze. "You're going to be okay," he said again, with quiet certainty. And for the first time, the German shepherd didn't flinch at the sound of a human voice. It would be a long road ahead. Learning to eat without fear. Learning to trust that a touch wouldn't bring pain. Learning to sleep without nightmares. But at that moment, as he took in his first real glimpse of the world outside his prison, something inside him shifted. The road to healing had begun. The German shepherd's journey was far from over. Though his body had been freed from the cold, suffocating darkness, his heart and mind were still trapped in the shadows of his past. Every movement, every sound, every unfamiliar sensation sent tremors through his fragile frame. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. The man who had found him, the only human whose touch didn't bring fear, was determined to help him heal. It wouldn't happen overnight. It wouldn't be easy. But step by step, moment by moment, the dog would learn what it meant to feel safe again. And it all began with the simplest yet most profound steps toward recovery. His first meal and his first peaceful rest. The man placed a bowl of food in front of him, careful not to startle the trembling dog. The German shepherd sniffed the air, hesitant and uncertain. His ribs jutted out, his body weak from starvation, yet he did not rush to eat. Instead, he hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to be cautious. For so long, food had been a cruel trick. In the past, hunger had gnawed at his stomach, but eating had come at a cost. Pain, suffering, punishment. He had learned to associate survival with fear. The man sat beside him, not rushing him. "It's yours," he whispered, his voice calm and steady. "No one will take it from you." Minutes passed. Then, slowly, the dog lowered his head, his nose brushing against the food. His tongue flicked out hesitantly, tasting something unfamiliar, something he hadn't known in a long time. Real food, warm, nourishing, safe. A soft whimper escaped him as he took his first cautious bite. Then another, and another. His body, frail and exhausted, craved the nourishment. But his mind still feared it was all a cruel illusion. But the man never moved. He never reached out to take the food away. And slowly, the dog realized he didn't have to fight for it. For the first time, he ate without fear. When his stomach could take no more, his head drooped, exhaustion washing over him. His body still trembled, unsure of his new reality. Sleep had been a dangerous thing in his past life. Closing his eyes meant letting his guard down. But tonight was different. The man laid a soft blanket beside him, offering a space that was his and his alone. A bed. Not the hard, cold floor of his prison. Not the dirt and filth of his past, but something soft. Something that smelled of kindness. The dog hesitated, his tired eyes flickering between the man and the blanket. Then, with slow, unsteady movements, he lowered himself down. His breathing remained uneven at first, his body rigid. But as the minutes passed, his muscles began to relax. The warmth of the blanket wrapped around him, the quiet presence of the man beside him bringing something he hadn't known in a long time. Peace. For the first time in weeks, the German Shepherd closed his eyes, not out of fear, but out of trust. And he slept. Days passed, then weeks. Each day brought a new challenge, a new test of his fragile trust. Some days, he would flinch at sudden sounds, his body curling inward as if expecting pain. Other days, he would hesitate at the door, uncertain if stepping outside meant freedom or another trap. But with every small victory, the shadows in his eyes began to fade. He learned that a hand reaching toward him wasn't meant to hurt, that a leash didn't mean control but safety, that the man's voice, once unfamiliar, was now a source of reassurance. The first time his tail wagged, just the smallest flicker of movement, the man's eyes filled with emotion. The first time he stepped outside without fear, the world no longer seemed so overwhelming. The first time he leaned his head against the man's hand, seeking comfort instead of shrinking away, the journey he had fought so hard to take felt real. He was no longer just a forgotten prisoner of darkness. He was a survivor, and as he stood in the golden light of a new dawn, the scars of his past still visible but no longer defining him, it became clear. This was not just a rescue. This was a second chance at life. The German Shepherd's story was not just one of survival. It was a powerful reminder of the silent suffering that countless animals endure every day. For weeks, he had been locked away, alone in the darkness, forgotten by the world. His pain had gone unseen, his cries unheard. And yet, his spirit had held on, clinging to the smallest sliver of hope. But he was one of the lucky ones. He had been found, saved, given a second chance. There are thousands, millions of animals who are not so lucky. His story was not just his own. It was the story of every abandoned dog, every starving stray, every neglected creature left to suffer in silence. And it was a call to action. Animal neglect is a silent epidemic, one that often goes unnoticed until it is too late. For every rescued animal, there are countless others still trapped in suffering, chained in backyards without food or water, locked in cages too small for them to move, left to starve on the streets, beaten and abused by the very people they trust. Some endure their pain until their bodies give out, never knowing kindness. Some are surrendered to shelters, only to be put down because no one comes for them. And some, like the German Shepherd, are left to die in places where no one is looking. This is not just a rare tragedy. It happens every day in every corner of the world. But it doesn't have to. Every act of kindness, every voice that speaks up, every person who chooses to care can make a difference. A single moment of compassion saved this dog's life. Imagine what could happen if more people chose to act. The German Shepherd's first glimpse of light had been heartbreaking. His eyes, once filled with fear, unable to understand what kindness truly was. But as time passed, as trust was built, as love replaced pain, something remarkable happened. His eyes changed. They no longer held the weight of his past. Instead, they shone with something else, something fragile but unbreakable. Hope. No matter how dark the world had been for him, he had found the light again. And if he could, so could others. Every abandoned dog, every neglected animal, every forgotten soul deserves the chance to heal, to be loved, to start over. But they cannot do it alone. The world must be their voice. The world must be their light in the darkness. Because hope isn't just something we wait for, it's something we create. And for every animal in need, that hope can mean the difference between life and death. This German Shepherd story is just one of many. Every day, countless animals suffer in silence, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice them, to save them, to show them that kindness still exists. You can be that someone. Paw prints report animal neglect and abuse. If you see an animal in distress, don't look away. Contact your local animal rescue, shelter, or authorities. Your action could save a life. Paw prints adopt. Don't shop. Shelters and rescues are full of loving animals waiting for a second chance. Instead of buying, consider giving a homeless pet the love they deserve. Paw prints support rescues and shelters, whether through donations, volunteering, or spreading awareness. Every effort counts. Even a small contribution can provide food, medical care, and shelter for an animal in need. Paw prints educate and inspire. Share this story. Talk to friends and family about responsible pet ownership. The more people who care, the more lives that can be saved. This dog was rescued from the darkness, but many are still waiting. Let's be the light that guides them home. Glowing Star, together, we can make a difference. Glowing Star.